Hello, I'm Florence and welcome to my channel. Today we have a special guest narrator. Are you ready? Pull up a chair and let's get started. Vincent is a man who believed he had already witnessed the worst that mankind could offer. A cameraman by trade, a witness by necessity. For 15 years he recorded fire, riot, war, and the daily cruelties that pass as ordinary news. He thought evil was measurable, contained in smoke, sirens, blood, and the grief of survivors. Tonight, he will learn that evil is not confined to men or their cities. It waits in older places, in caves that hold their silence for centuries, and in the relics of forgotten worlds. Vincent has come to record history, but what he will uncover is not the past. It is something that never leaves. The lesson is simple and very old. Some things are not meant to be seen. Please help me welcome today's guest narrator, Vincent.
Thank you, Florence, for allowing me to share my story here. I'll get straight to it. I worked behind a camera for most of my life, more than 30 years, long enough that I thought I had already seen the worst of what people could do to one another. I'd seen neighborhoods burn until there was nothing left but ash. I'd seen riots where men kicked each other until the ground ran dark. And I'd seen parents in war zones lifting sheets, praying the body underneath wasn't their child. I kept telling myself I was only the one holding the camera, that I was just there to record it. But after a while, it doesn't matter. You carry it with you whether you want to or not. After a while, I thought I was immune, like nothing could get to me anymore. That's why I thought retirement would be easy. I bought a cabin way out in the woods. I told myself it was time to stop. No deadlines, no sirens, no more running toward the things everybody else was running away from. And for a little while, it seemed to work. I drank my coffee in silence. I walked the trails, and actually slept through the night. But then the quiet got heavy. Days passed too slowly. By the second month, I was making lists of chores just to have something to do, and by the third I realized I missed it. Not the horror, not the blood, but the weight of the camera, the feeling that I was seeing something that mattered, even if it was terrible. That was when John called. John Anderson. We had been through it all together, him with the microphone and me with the lens. John was the kind of reporter who could talk his way into anything, the mayor's office, a police barricade, or even a military checkpoint. It didn't matter. He would smile, ask just the right question, and before anyone realized what happened, we were already inside with the cameras rolling. He said he was retired, same as me. But the second I heard his voice on the phone, I knew he had never really let it go. He wanted me to meet him at a pub we used to go to back when we were always chasing stories. I remember walking in and seeing him already at the table with that same grin, the one that made it seem like he had already won. He slid a folder across the wood before I even sat down. Inside were photographs, sheets of gold pressed into the shapes of faces, some small, some large, some covering just the eyes or the mouth, others the whole face. They were so detailed that even in a flat picture they looked alive, as if they were breathing. He called them orifices, burial pieces. Said tribes used them in the Philippines, covering the openings of the body so that the spirit couldn't escape and cause trouble for the living. He talked about it like he always did, quick and persuasive, like he had already rehearsed it. A climber had found them in a cave halfway up a mountain, burial jars, bones and gold masks, untouched for centuries. I should have closed the folder right there. I should have told him no, but I didn't. The longer I looked at those faces pressed into the gold, the harder it was to look away. John always had a way of making you feel like you were already on board before you'd even agreed. He leaned back with his pint and said,
"This isn't treasure hunting, Vincent. This is history. We'll give the dead their story back."
He smiled when he said it, but his eyes had something else in them. I asked who else was involved, and that's when he told me about Rose and Angelo. Rose was a young historian, fresh out of her doctorate. John said she was brilliant, but still young enough to believe in discovery the way we once believed in journalism. And Angelo, the mountaineer who had found the cave and taken the photographs, would be our guide. I should have said no. Instead, I found myself on a flight to Manila. We drove north to a town where the streets turned to dirt, and the only light was from cooking fires. Rose looked younger than I expected, with sharp eyes that seemed too restless to stay in one place. She shook my hand firmly, though there was a tiredness behind her smile. Angelo was quiet, stocky, with the kind of hands you only get from rope burns and rock faces. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. He just pushed a stack of photographs across the table. The photo showed the jagged entrance, half hidden by vines. Inside were jars, taller than a man's waist, sealed tight. Some were carved with waves, others with symbols I didn't recognize. One was open, and curled inside was a skeleton. Thin sheets of gold pressed to its face, covering the eyes and mouth. Rose leaned forward.
These weren't just decorations. They were meant to seal the spirit in.
She turned one photo toward me, a full mask, so detailed it looked alive.
If there are more like this, we could change what we know about burial practices in Southeast Asia.
Angelo tapped one of the photos with his calloused finger.
The entrance is narrow, but once you are inside, it's a straight tunnel.
John chuckled and raised his glass.
That's atmosphere, Vincent. Imagine how it will look on film.
I didn't answer. My eyes stayed on the photograph of the mask. The hollow ovals for eyes seemed to stare back at me, and the slight parting of the mouth gave the impression it was about to speak. We set out the next morning before dawn. The road twisted higher into the mountains until it narrowed to a dirt track. By the time we left the van, the forest was thick around us, damp and quiet. The silence pressed in as we walked, broken only by the crunch of our boots. Even the birds stayed out of earshot. I remember thinking how strange it was that a place so full of life could feel so empty. Rose walked beside me, hugging her notebook against her chest. She kept muttering about burial customs, but her voice sounded smaller out here, swallowed by the trees. After 3 hours of climbing, Angelo stopped and pointed to a wall of vines, indicating the direction we needed to go. He pushed them aside to reveal a slit in the rock no wider than a door frame. The air that came out was hot and dry, carrying the faint metallic tang of old coins. John grinned, already pulling his phone from his pocket.
This is it. The story is waiting for us.
Inside, the tunnel swallowed our lights. The walls were smooth, unnaturally so, as if they had been carved on purpose. Jars stood in rows, their lids sealed tight. Dust lay thick, but the air held nothing of dampness, only that sharp, dried taste that cut at the throat. Rose brushed one of the jars with her sleeve and whispered,
Still intact. Centuries untouched.
She tilted the cracked lid of another, and the beam of her flashlight fell on the skeleton curled inside. Its face gleamed faintly with gold pressed against bone. John crouched beside her.
You're telling me nobody has seen this since it was sealed?
No, nobody has. At least, not until now.
I held the camera steady, but in the viewfinder, the mask didn't look dead. The light rippled across it, as though something beneath the gold was still in motion. We kept going. The jars gave way to broken ones, bones spilling across the floor. In one skull, I saw gold cut like a tongue resting against the teeth. My stomach tightened. The tunnel ended in a shape that made my breath catch. The shape was crouched against the wall, its knees to its chest, its arms looped tight. The surface glistened with hardened layers of gold, uneven and rough, dripping as though it had been poured molten and left to cool. From its chest jutted dozens of gold blades, their hilts dull with age.
It isn't a statue. It's a binding.
John lifted his phone to film. His voice was careful, almost reverent.
This is it. The find of a lifetime.
And then I heard it. A sound low and heavy, drawn through the dry air. A breath. Rose's hand shook as she clutched her sleeve to her mouth. I knew she heard it too. My camera quivered in my grip. John stared, his grin fading but not enough to pull him back. Angelo's voice cut the silence.
No! Nobody touched the knives.
John's fingers closed around one of the hilts anyway. I said his name, but he didn't look back. He tugged once, twice, and the blade slid free with a scraping echo that traveled far beyond the tunnel walls.
No! Stop. Put it back.
But John didn't. He ran his finger along the edge, and when it split his skin, the blood welled bright and fell onto the gold figure. The metal absorbed it. I swear I saw it. The red vanished into the uneven surface as if it were being absorbed. The air thickened instantly. My ears popped with pressure, and a sound rose from deeper inside the tunnel. Not a growl, not a sigh, but something too deep, too heavy to belong to lungs. The jars rattled. Bones shifted. One of the skulls tilted forward, and gold peeled from its mouth with a wet sound. That was when I knew. We had broken something that was never meant to be touched. The jars began to shake, not all at once, but one after another, like a slow ripple passing down the tunnel. Lids shifted. I could hear brittle bones scraping inside. My light swept over the room and I saw fingers, thin and splintered, clawing through cracks that had been sealed for centuries. Rose's voice came out thin and breaking.
We have to go. Now. Run!
Angelo didn't answer. He pulled her back by the arm and started toward the entrance. His grip looked steady, too steady for someone who should have been panicking. That stayed with me later. John was still kneeling, clutching the dagger, his face lit with a feverish glow. He wasn't laughing yet, not then, but his eyes were alive in a way that frightened me more than the masks. Then, the gold figure moved. It started with the head. The heavy crust of gold shifted and lifted, and two deep hollows turned toward us. No eyes, but I felt it see me. The sound that came from it was not a growl, not a word, just a long, dry inhale that seemed to pull the air out of the chamber. My chest ached as though it was drawing the breath straight from me. I dropped the camera. I couldn't keep hold of it. The bones spilled out of the jars then. Skulls hit the stone with cracks that echoed up and down the tunnel. Some of them still wore their masks. The thin sheets clung to their faces, peeling away with strands of hair and scraps of dried flesh. Jaws opened and closed. Teeth clacked together in rhythm with the low sound filling the chamber.
Do you see it, Vincent? We woke them.
I could barely stand. Rose was coughing blood into her sleeve. Her voice was not her own when she spoke again. It carried layers, as if more than one person was using her mouth.
The seal is broken.
My light caught the gold figure again. It was rising now, dragging itself upright. Its arms scraped the stone floor as it stood. The knives that had been driven into its chest rattled and bent, some snapping under the weight of its shifting body. Gold flaked off, revealing something beneath, something that glistened wet and raw, as if it had never been meant to see the air. It stepped forward. Each time its foot hit the stone, the ground trembled. Gold hissed when it fell from its body to the floor, as though it was still hot, though the air was colder than it had been when we entered. Rose collapsed onto her knees. She was sobbing and chanting at the same time, her voice broken and layered. John moved toward the figure, dagger raised as if he were presenting it back. I knew then that Angelo had led us here for this. I didn't want to believe it, but he stood there, watching John, not lifting a hand to help. He knew. Maybe he had always known. I turned and ran. I don't know how my legs carried me, but they did. The jars blurred past. The floor of the cave buckled with every step of that thing behind me. Stone cracked. Gold snapped. The knives that had once pinned it fell away one by one, hitting the floor like bells ringing in the dark. I should never have looked back, but I did. The figure was no longer crouched. It was unfolding from the wall, dragging its body forward with arms that were too long and too low, scraping sparks from the stone. Gold peeled off it in strips, hissing when it struck the ground. And underneath was something slick and black, the texture of meat that had never seen the air. Its mask, fused into what passed for its face, split open at the mouth. There were no teeth, only a dark hollow, and the sound that came out was not a roar, not a scream, but a slow inhale. It drew the air straight out of the tunnel, straight out of me. The bones answered it. Every jar rattled, skulls clacked their jaws in rhythm. And then came the drums. At first I thought it was my heartbeat, wild in my ears, but the rhythm was too steady. It came from the walls, the ground, the very air, a deep pounding that shook the earth, like fists on a coffin lid, like a funeral procession rising to meet us. Each beat carried heat, and tongues of fire bled from the cracks in the stone, drifting into the air like glowing embers that refused to die. They floated around me, hovering at my shoulders, brushing my skin with warmth that burned but left no mark. When I tried to bat them away, my hand passed through them like smoke. And the whispers. God, the whispers. They weren't Rose's voice anymore, though I heard her too, crying, praying, breaking. These were older voices, layered and countless. They slid under my skin, inside my skull, calling me by name, telling me to stop, to kneel, to let the mountain take me too. I ran. My flashlight beam swung wildly, cutting the dark into frantic slices. Every time it struck a wall, I saw faces, masks staring out at me, their eyes hollow, their mouths open. Some hung in the air without bodies. Others floated past like fish in deep water. One opened its mouth, and a tongue of gold spilled out, writhing like it wanted to taste the ground. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. I ran out of the cave and thought the night would save me, but it didn't. The forest had changed. The trees leaned closer. Their branches knotted like arms. Their trunks pressed so tight, it was as if they were trying to trap me inside. The drums followed, louder now, echoing in the roots beneath my feet. Each beat rattled my bones. Behind me, the Anito clawed its way into the open air. The Alito followed me into the forest. The stone gave way like paper, crumbling as it pulled itself free. In the flashlight beam, I saw its head bent too low, its arms dragging the earth. Gold poured from its body in molten sheets, pooling on the ground and hardening instantly into sharp fragments. Each time it moved, it shed more, as though it was remaking itself with every step. I screamed for John, for Rose, for Angelo. No answer. There was only the breathing, the drums, the whispers that grew sharper with every word. The forest bent itself into a maze. Paths I didn't recognize split and rejoined. I tripped on roots that hadn't been there seconds earlier. My lungs burned. My throat tore with every breath, but I didn't dare stop. Once I fell hard on my hands and knees, My light spun away, and in its beam I saw Angelo standing between the trees. He was too still. His face was hidden behind a sheet of gold that clung tightly over his eyes and mouth. He lifted his hand as though beckoning me back. When I blinked, he was gone. But the shadows he left behind twisted into shapes that chased me deeper. I ran until my body gave out, but somehow my legs kept moving. The world tilted. The drum slowed, then quickened, then faded, replaced by the long, endless breath of the mountain. By the time dawn broke, the sounds had fallen silent. I don't remember the rest clearly. I remember collapsing on a dirt road, foam at my mouth, blood on my palms. I remember the faces of strangers bending over me, their voices too far away to understand. The days that followed blur together. Manila, a hospital, questions I couldn't answer. Then the embassy, then the police. They asked the same things again and again. What happened to the others? Why I was the only one who returned, and what I had seen inside. I tried to explain. I wanted to tell them. Masks that breathed, gold that drank blood, a creature that clawed its way out of the mountain. My words sounded mad, even to me. I saw it in their eyes. They thought I had killed them, that I had abandoned them. At one point, I heard the word suspect whispered between two officers. But they never had proof. No bodies, no evidence. Nothing left but me, shaking, unable to sleep, my story falling apart every time I repeated it. Eventually, they let me go. I got on a plane. I stared out the window at clouds I couldn't focus on. When I landed back in the States, everything looked smaller, quieter, unreal. My cabin in the woods felt more like a cage than a home, and at night, when it is still, when even the crickets fall silent, I hear it again, that long breath dragging through the dark. Sometimes I see gold flicker at the edge of the trees. Sometimes I dream of Angelo waiting with his rope bag, ready to lead the next group up the mountain. I came back alive, but I never escaped. Not really.
Thank you, Vincent, for sharing your tale. The tale of a cameraman who thought he knew what horror was, until the mountain taught him otherwise. In the end, no bodies were found. No masks recovered. Only Vincent remained, and the sound of a breath he still swears he hears in the dark. Some stories close with answers. This one closes with a question. What if the seal was never meant to hold forever? I hope you've enjoyed today's story. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons, and feel free to leave a comment. Until next time, I wish you a great day.